Hi there, my name is Saucey. I play all of the NPCs as well as the Dungeon Master for King's Road Young Lions, and this is the post campaign spotlight.
Hello, Saucy. Let's get behind the DM screen and hear what it was like from the DM's point of view. We have a bunch of questions, so let's just jump right into it. Looking back on the campaign, how do you feel about the way the story unfolded? Did it meet or exceed your expectations?
Well, there was a completely different story that was written before the campaign started. We were definitely going to go to all the 7 different territories, compete for the world championship on the King's Road. There were definitely going to be obstacles along the way, but there was never a railroad that said that the party had to do exactly what the story dictated that they do. In fact, there was a railroad gang that we never even saw. They were supposed to take a train to one of the other territories, and then a gang of wrestling cowboys were supposed to rob the train and do some nefarious things. So it would have been a little bit old western like, and there were certainly some characters drawn up for that, but it never happened. Instead, we went the route of keeping things completely organic because it was really important that the players had agency over their decisions. Their choices had to make a difference and they had to sculpt the story. Because of that, the story ended up being a lot longer than I originally anticipated it taking. I thought it would just be one episode per territory and then maybe an episode at the beginning and an episode at the end just to tie things up in a bow. Instead, we got 44 episodes, which I'm very proud of. But man, that was an emotional drain on me. It was a lot of work writing those episodes, performing them, and recording, editing, all of that. Every time we went into a show, I was nervous. And then after every show, I had this sense of responsibility to make sure the show was published in a way that paid respect to the players.
What was your favorite moment as the DM? Was there a specific scene where the players completely surprised you?
Well, this will probably come up a bunch of times, but Grapple Mania was by far my favorite moment as the DM for personal reasons and for entertainment value. Because at that point, all expectations were subverted. The party was engaged in this battle royale to try to win this gym badge, right? I believe it was Bronson that was trying to win his gym badge. They were completely focused on an athletic competition, which up until then, that everything had been based on the integrity of the sport. There were some there were some challengers that got in the way with the hard way, just kind of being a thorn in their side the whole time. But at Grapple Mania, we flipped the script and we introduced the darker order, right? This cult that dabbled in the dark arts, summoning just terrible beasts and causing sickness and disease and killing people indiscriminately without a purpose, it seemed like at the time. So the whole campaign really turned at that point and went in a different direction. For me, as the DM, the worry was always, geez, I hope this doesn't feel like we just jumped the shark here. Because everybody could have thought, wow, this is cheap, this is corny. We need to pursue the hard way and the championship. We don't have time for all this other crap. But we're playing D&D, so up until that point, we didn't really have any monsters. We had some that kind of got in the way. We had a lion and a sea monster, but other than that, it was mostly just other people getting in the way. The party was really, really handcuffed there because they couldn't just kill every person they came into contact with. So At Grapplemania, the rules change, and then all of a sudden, Rosa says, "You know what? Go for it. It's go time. They have gone too far this time. Bronson, get after him." And the party did, right? It was a bit of a bloodbath there, but it felt, for the first time, I think, in the entire campaign, the party really felt like they were at risk. We were halfway through the territories by that point. That was the end of the fourth territory. So halfway through the episodes, and just to put a final stamp on the whole thing, Grapplemania happens, and then on the way out, the party takes an urn, turns it into a bomb, and blows up half the city. And that was unexpected. It wasn't supposed to happen, but you put a shiny object in front of them and the ability to create explosives, you have to let them use it. So they blow up the town, and then just to put a cap on the mid-season finale, we threw in a cutscene of Vance McDragon, introducing him to the campaign as this mastermind who is more evil than anything they could imagine. So, Grapplemania, all roads lead to and come from Grapplemania.
If you had to sum up the campaign in just 3 words, what would they be?
It was awesome, right? I know I kid. That's the name of the channel. This is awesome, but it really needed to feel awesome. That if you don't walk away from the project feeling like that was so cool, man. So glad that I did that. So glad that I went there. So glad I showed up. If you didn't walk away from a session feeling that way, that was definitely a failure on my part. And most of the episodes felt like they were wins. There were a handful that just didn't hit. They dragged on. They landed. They didn't land. Or we cut off at the wrong point. There were times when I retconned the ending at the beginning of the next show just to make it a little bit, so things would make a little bit more sense. But overall, the campaign, it was awesome.
Let's go back to the beginning. How did the idea for this campaign come about? What inspired the fusion of high fantasy and professional wrestling?
Well, there was this itch, right? Maybe we were just coming out of the pandemic. And for me, I wanted to tell a collaborative story because that's really what D&D and role-playing games should be. At least the pen and paper versions, is that you should be collaborating with other people to tell a story together. Of course, I have a love of pro wrestling, one that I had as a child and then came back to in the mid-teens, inspired by NXT and then the rise of AEW in conjunction with Critical Role, which got really big at the time, and The Legend of Vox Machina, which an amazing animated series. Pro wrestling and high fantasy have things in common other than the basic storylines which you see repeated over and over again in all stories, but there are huge personalities and production value. I could find a way to pull that out of pro wrestling and inject that into a D&D story. It was a guaranteed recipe for a good time, and that's really what I needed. The pro wrestling gave me a structure, a set of rules to operate by, and a clear sense of good and evil. That's pro wrestling just isn't the same without those things. Create a D&D campaign with a fantasy world full of pro wrestling personality, and making sure that it's done in a positive, rewarding way.
Kafabia is such a unique setting, from the King's Road to grappling competitions as a core part of the world. How much of that was planned from the start, and how much developed along the way?
Well, really, the world setting is the only constant, right? There was always going to be the structure of 7 territories. There was always going to be a different flavor to each one. And the idea, the seed that was planted right away was to mix together components of Pokemon, the Hunger Games, and WMAC Masters. If you've never seen WMAC Masters, it's a kids show from the 90s where different martial artists from around the world would compete with each other for a chance to win a badge. And once they completed all the badges, they could challenge for the Dragon Belt. Some similarities there, right? You can watch it on YouTube, probably the Wayback Machine. It's definitely corny, but it's a neat idea. If they could take it a little bit more seriously and maybe I don't know, maybe the episodic way that it's written works. But I think it certainly worked in the campaign that we created. So basically, we have a kingdom, Kafabia. We split it into multiple territories, each with a distinct flavor. That's much like Hunger Games, right? Then we put the party on a MacGuffin quest to visit each one of those territories and collect a badge by beating the gym boss in some type of challenge, most of them being physical combat. So once that structure was set up, the fuse was lit. And for the party, that was presented to them. Where do you want to go? Geographically, these places were all different. Some were closer, some were farther away, some were in the mountains, and some were on the beaches. The characters were from different territories, so they could go home first or they could go away. But it was entirely up to them to decide what they wanted to do, which is great. They didn't do what I expected them to do, which probably I should have expected. That's just how D&D goes, right? But after all this is done, they collect all the pieces of the MacGuffin. There was always going to be a battle with the world champion at the end. And all of these characters that they meet along the way, including that world champion, were always going to be inspired by real pro wrestling personalities. The folks that have a love for pro wrestling, we're going to pick up on some of those inside jokes. And every time they see a recognizable face or hear a line from one of their childhood heroes, they get filled with nostalgia. And you can't put a price on that. The experience for those that are pro wrestling fans must have been so much better than those who were not familiar with pro wrestling, because they got to enjoy those extra juicy bits that were thrown in there as a nod to the world of pro wrestling. We did a pretty good job of nuancing the characters and the concepts of pro wrestling into the story while still making the story unique.
How did the original player recruitment process go? What were you looking for in players when assembling the party?
Well, the decision was made early on to recruit people online. The option was there to recruit friends or to go to a local game shop and to run things that way. But getting older, and they say you lose half your friends every 7 years, it is not feasible to expect your friends to show up every week when they have kids, they have jobs, they have mortgages, that sort of thing. But to ask people to play online is a more reasonable ask. So I wanted to start with a fresh new set of players that had no expectations about who I was or what to expect from me. And because of that, the work would speak for itself, right? Also, I wanted to meet new people. I mean, as simple as that sounds, I mean, that was definitely a driving force in the beginning. And if you're going to meet new people and make new friends, they might as well have the same interest that you do. And in this case, pro wrestling, TNT. So what I do is I go on Reddit, and this may have been the last time I actually went on Reddit, and I put a post out there that says, hey, we're looking for a group. And I gave a summary of the game world, gave a summary of the expected story, at least the jumping off point of that story. And I also listed what type of characters I wanted to cast. So this was being cast like a TV show. And we needed one person for each role. We needed a central character which was basically the talented fool that was full of, that was nothing but potential, and then that entourage around them. A healer, uh, a social, one that would excel in social interaction, and a magic user, and a bodyguard. And that was always the plan right from the beginning. So for me as the DM, it made the story work. Instead of having five that wanted to be the world champion, we could focus our energy into one, and then everybody supports that one. And it worked, and everybody was on board with that because I was upfront about, hey, this is the expectation here, and it worked. So the cast was given a set of pre-selected classes that they could use and would fit into this martial world that we were running. So some of the classes in D&D, uh, you know, being honest, are a little bit too over the top, or they were too over the top for me back then when I was just getting into serious DMing. And I didn't feel like I was capable of managing the story with these over the top personalities. So we cut out some of these classes, especially the exotic ones. We cut out some of the more exotic races because the world that we were in was very much human based. And the whole spin on everything was finding that central character. And in this case, it was Zinthral. Right? He was pushed onto the party. Hey, he's your responsibility now. Ride him to the top. You all needed a contender to push through the King's Road. And it was important for that character, in my opinion, to be a male character because all of the top pro wrestling runs, with the exception of a couple, have been done by male wrestlers. So, keeping in that theme, we decided it needed to be like a young man, which Zinthral was. We put some hard lines on some other things, on some homebrew concepts that were pitched our way, because we just wanted to keep things as simple as they could be, and that was probably a wise decision on my part.
The campaign was built around both epic storytelling and high-octane wrestling-style battles. How did you balance those elements?
Well, pro wrestling is storytelling. You see this now with some of the wrestling products where some of the matches have two wrestlers or more that are absolutely killing each other in the ring. They could be just completely bloody faced, and they could be jumping off of ladders or from other high spots, but it doesn't matter, right? Because they haven't made it clear to the audience in person and at home as to why they're fighting to begin with. You just do a cold open and these guys are already fighting. Why should I care? Why should I care? Pro wrestling without a story is just violence, and it just feels wrong. Like, you respect the athleticism, but also there's no heart there. And I need a primer. I need to know why I should care. I mean, it's that simple. We knew early on that our quest had to be about more than just obtaining a trophy or a championship belt. It had to be about more than just violence or a body count. There had to be a reason why the party kept going. So as time went along, we kept raising the stakes. We introduced new villains. We put friends of the party in danger and family members. And by the end, it didn't just feel like the party wanted the campaign to be over. It felt like the party wanted to see an end to this conflict. They actually wanted their characters to walk away happy. And that made me pretty happy, right? And I'm very proud of that. It was satisfying to see things unfold the way that it did. And it didn't have to end that way. Keep in mind, there were points where characters could have died, or they could have chosen to end things. They could have chosen to walk away. But the ones that stuck through to the end, they got the payoff in the end.
The concept of the King's Road and earning badges from gyms felt like a mix of a tournament arc and a classic wrestling circuit. How did you ensure each gym felt distinct?
Right. So each territory had its own flavor. And of course, the NPCs were always going to be different in each town. The images that we used and the battle maps also helped. We even tried to mix in some music here and there to just kind of give you that vibe. We wanted each town to have a culture of its own that was unique. So each, just like in Hunger Games, each district had, or I use the term district because of the Hunger Games stuff, but each territory had its own industry that they specialized in that supported the kingdom. Now, the party didn't really have any interest in what industries were happening in those towns. Given a different set of players, they might have pursued those avenues a little bit more, but they were just happy to just keep moving along. And that was fine with me, right? Although a lot of extra prep work had gone into like creating these economies of these towns, the party was happy to just move on, and I was happy as well. Over time, each of these districts developed their own style of combat to fit the just the energy of that region. And what we ended up with was areas that specialize in classic pro wrestling. Some were luchador style. There were hardcore wrestling areas, slap fighting, boxing, battle royales, martial arts dojos, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu. There was something different in each territory, and depending on where they went first, they were going to get that. We wanted each territory to feel like a chapter of a book that made transitioning from one MacGuffin to another really easy. I don't know that it needed to be episodic where they always returned to status quo at the end of a block. And I don't think it did turn out that way. I think that there was some growth with each territory. Like everybody changed just a little bit after each experience, which is pretty cool and was certainly not guaranteed. The players always stayed engaged because they were excited about what was next, and they were really proud about, hey, we knocked out another badge. That's one more we can check off the list. And that's got to be a great feeling, right? So then the party rolls into each town, and it's like opening a box of new action figures, right? Like, who's in there? Oh, what can they do? Oh, do they have, little weapons or outfits that go with them? So they take them out of the package and they play around with them for a while to see what they can do. And then finally, when they get tired of their new toys, it's time to move on. Let's go open a new box of toys somewhere else. That's great. It's great to be able to offer that to players. And when they appreciate the creations that you put in front of them, it's like, yeah, got it. Nailed that one. Now, there were some that didn't land, but there were others that they really latched onto, and that's a good feeling. So with all that said, the story worked great. Some of the game mechanics in each territory, especially at the gyms, were a little clunky and too random for some of the players, especially early on. But there was an attempt there to keep things fresh and to build in some mini games that were more than just, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him until he's dead. Um, we had to deal with a couple scenarios where people were unhappy. They felt like they didn't have any player agency over the rules in those games, and that's probably something that I would go back and tweak a little bit next time, just to make sure we're clear about, hey, here are your options, and here is how you can overcome this task without just keeping your fingers crossed and hoping for a nice dice roll.
Hope and optimism were part of the campaign's core values. What were some moments where you saw the players embody that theme the most?
Well, Rosa Blackthorn is the embodiment of hope. little legs and a big heart, right? There were moments where she tried to prevent the party from killing their targets. Bronson, they're just babies. Or Bronson, don't kill him, pull him out of the water. There were other times where she just didn't want things to turn violent. And that gave me a sense of hope, right? That there was still goodness left somewhere in the world, even if it's just a player trying to seem good, which I think the player is actually a great person. I think that she believed there was still good in people, that Rosa believed there was still good in people, and that there was still innocence in nature. And that was nice to see real kindness from a character. But towards the end of the campaign, the drive was different. There was a compulsion to end evil in the world. And at that point, the party was strong enough that they could actually take down members of this cult. And then you start to kind of believe that they're more than just a gang. And Rosa's more than just, a nice person. This group is now on a righteous quest. And they're doing something that's good for more than just themselves. They are changing the world for the better. And that is hope and optimism. I don't, if that's not, I don't know what is.
Were there any major plot points that evolved in unexpected ways due to player choices?
Well, let's ask the hard way, right? I mean, the party blew them up. They went into their headquarters, they planted a super bomb, and they blew up all of them and then sailed away. Right? I mean, that was unexpected. That was not prompted to them. The idea was not given to them. They could have made friends with the hard way. They decided, nope, we're taking them out. We're not giving them a chance to come back and exact any revenge on us. So they infiltrated the gang under a false disguise. They made a bomb out of an urn, and then they blew up everything with just a smidge of regard for who would pass in the process. They did have one friend who they paid to stay at a brothel all day long and to stay out of business and stay out of trouble. And because of that, that person did survive. Um, the name is escaping me at this point, but you know who I'm talking about if you're in the party. Everything that happened in the game happened either before or after the hard way was destroyed, and that includes losing an essential part of the party, Zinthral. The player left the campaign at that time, and it always sucks when you lose a player. You feel rejected in a way, like, what did I do? Could I have done something different, and would they still be here? We're really not sure why the player left, but we respected their wishes, and we still do, and we pivoted the story. So the focus was no longer on Zinthral. It became about Bronson being on the King's Road. We just improvised from there. Bringing in the cutscene from McDragon sucking the life out of the head booker, Dane Caruso, was a smart choice on my part, because they almost forgot about Zinthral at that point. And they were like, we got real problems to worry about. So, if he's gone, hopefully he's not, Zinthral is not dead. We wish him the best, but we have real things to worry about now. Yeah, Dane Caruso. Jeez, I barely even remember that guy now. There's so many characters who I forgot. Oh, yeah. They were in the campaign. It's a good thing that we have a nice little archive of all those characters to go back and go, I remember that guy. I remember her. I remember that thing.
There were a lot of unanswered questions left at the end of the campaign. Were these intentional hooks for a potential season 2, or did the story naturally leave these open-ended?
Well, yes and no. The season was intentionally cut right at the climax. And you see this on some popular shows where the conflict is resolved, so that threat is over with. But you don't get the immediate epilogue. In fact, when the next season starts, there's some time that's passed, and you have to figure out like, oh, why does this person look different? Why are they in a different place? And why are they acting differently than before? So you're starting over in the next season, kind of relearning the setting. And there's some fun in that. That discovery process is very fun in a pilot episode. So we thought, why not do the same thing with the campaign? I want to keep minds curious about what happened after the dragon was slayed. I want them to guess. Well, here's what I think would happen. Here's what my character would do. Here's where the story goes next. We're planning on tackling some of those meatier topics in a postseason epilogue episode where the party will be given some creative freedom to give their character the happy ending that they deserve. But we're still going to leave some of those questions unanswered because we may decide to come back for a season 2, or we may decide to run new characters in the same game world that's been affected by what happened in the first season.
How did the party's dynamic change over time? Did you notice any significant character growth or shifts in teamwork?
Well, yeah, we talked about this before with Zinthral originally being the focal point of the early campaign, kind of this foolish character who needed the guidance of everyone around him. And his benefactor, a man by the name of Harmon Stonefist, a man who was crafted around the concept of Roman Reigns at the time, who I absolutely despise. Harmon had ulterior motives the entire time and proved in the end to betray the party in an effort to gain some power position with Vance McDragon. So that was always planned right from the beginning. And maybe the party kind of sussed that out right away, but I think they forgot about Harmon, with the exception of Zinthral, who had a real connection to that character. Well, anyway, Zinthral leaves and Bronson throws his ring in the hat, his hat in the ring, and says, just in case things don't work out with Zinthral, it's probably a good idea to have a backup plan, and that's Bronson. It's a good thing, too, because we really did need him. But that rivalry between Zinthral and Bronson was this engine that got the quest off the ground. Yeah, they were assisting each other, but they were also competing with each other. And there was some real tension there that was intriguing. It's not something that you wanted to see every week, and at times I wasn't sure if it was real beef or not, but we did a great job of keeping it within the confines of what was happening in that session. The supporting characters around them had these opportunities to grow by handling both of those contenders in different ways. Bronson could be motivated differently than Zinthral could be, and I think that the supporting cast there really understood that. Back before Rosa would allow the party to kill anything, Bronson was an absolute tank, but as the quest went on, he started to take a backseat to others. Like, he was kind of this one-trick pony. I cast Greatsword, or I would like to rage, right? Which is great and useful and essential in these combats, but also there's not a lot of versatility there with the character. They do one thing, let them do their thing, and as the DM, I have to let them do that thing, or else they lose all agency. Anyway, by the final session, it felt like Bronson was kind of out of ideas and strategies. Had used up all his rages, kind of running low in hit points. So what does he do? He does show some growth. He turns to prayer, speaks to Groomsh, and says, grant me the strength this one last time, and I will worship you. I will serve you. And he makes that choice, and of course he's rewarded with another use of rage. That wasn't planned, but it inspired me. Like, wow, he's really putting himself out there, and he's used up every idea that he has. So for me, in that situation, tell him no, doesn't work. He may have just walked away from the table at that point. Uh, I may have if I were him. So it was neat to see him finally take that approach, and in a way, he goes further towards Rosa. Worshiping a god, albeit a different god, but learning something from Rosa in the process. And Rosa goes the other way. She learns something from Bronson in the process and becomes this juggernaut at the end. This avatar of light. And the two of them tag team the big boss at the end. I thought it was really cool. Hopefully, it came across that way. The other party members have been using their wits all along to find creative ways to handle solutions. There were there was even moments where one character would feel like the main character of the campaign, but a couple sessions later they didn't at all. I think by the end that each player and each character felt like they had their time in the spotlight, that they were all equal, that they all deserved equal credit for everything that they accomplished. I think they regarded each other in such a high manner of respect. And for me, that's a great accomplishment as a DM to see a party have mutual respect for each other.
Rosa Blackthorn made a huge sacrifice, giving up her cleric powers to become something new. How does that change the future of Kafabia?
I don't know that the decisions of one person changes the future of Kafabia, but it certainly changes things for Rosa, right? She's given up her own powers and really her identity to save the party. She probably wasn't even thinking about the ramifications of that or the bigger picture at the time. It just was a no-brainer for her. If she ever had to give her life to protect somebody else, she would probably do it. This is the moment where she was given that opportunity, and maybe she had been searching for that opportunity her entire life to do something good, to make a difference. That was presented to her, and she seized that opportunity, but in the process, what did she lose, right? Telling her story from here on out is a story that I'd like to investigate more, because I think that there's a lot that could happen. Now the gods are involved, maybe we do up the ante a little bit more. Who knows?
Bronson, Gator, Solomon, and Snugglecup each have unresolved personal arcs. Which one intrigues you the most, and why?
Well, there's still a lot of meat on the bone with Gator, right? Who comes from noble heritage, we just found out. That revelation not only changes his potential future, but it also brings into question everything about his past. What was he telling the truth about? What was he lying about? What was he hiding? I never regarded Gator as a liar or a deceiver, but he certainly left out a lot of the details. And I'd like to hear more about those details. The player has this creative freedom now to create his own origin story, to say, well, actually, when I was young, this, and this happened. And because of his position, you kind of have to take his word for it that he had access to everything in the kingdom. So anything that he wanted to happen could have happened, and that would explain why he went into hiding. So I think there's a lot of fun things that you can play with there.
How did the party's relationship with the Hardway and the Darker Order shape the way the campaign played out?
The Hardway was always meant to be the party's rival in the early game. It's pretty obvious that they were inspired by the New World Order, which, in my opinion, the greatest faction that pro wrestling has ever seen. I don't want to hear from the Degeneration X fans or the Four Horsemen fans or any of these other clubs that are out there. The New World Order was a high watermark for pro wrestling. Now, the end result of their existence was the destruction of a company and possibly the downfall of pro wrestling for a long time. But with an iconic group like that and so much source material to draw inspiration from, and, and what is probably a pre-existing hatred for them, just immediately recognizing them as they are the bad guys. I like them, but they are the bad guys. It made it really easy to have an instant conflict because not only did the party go, I want to fight them, they wanted to continue fighting them because they were a fun group, right? And there was a lot that could happen with that group. So we had to establish the idea right away that there are other competitors, and those competitors have a lot of resources backing them, and that this group, the Hard Way, is really, really arrogant. Just okay, we get it. They're not playing fair, and we as players don't like it when people don't play fair. And it worked. They took the bait. They decided we have to take them down right away. I don't like them. Um, they're arrogant and they are raunchy. Everything they do is just a little too on the nose. Somebody needs to put them in their place. And they're corrupt, right? They have deep roots. They have access to everything. So there was always this paranoia that the Hard Way was involved with what's going on. And there was this paranoia that they might show up and make things worse, or that they had secretly infiltrated what location the party was in at the time. Now, the Darker Order is a whole different story. Now, of course, you still have the components there where they may have infiltrated the society you're in, but I don't think they did a whole lot of hiding. I mean, you could pretty much tell right away somebody was Darker Order because they had the black and the purple. We had this theme of the color purple running through everything that they touched, the purple energy, the purple clothing. And that was always a nod of, ooh, this is cult-like. We got it. We must investigate. Whereas the Hard Way was meant to celebrate the finer aspects of the King's Road and the kingdom of Kafabia as a whole. The Darker Order was always introduced to destroy everything and to create a new world in the image of Vance McDragon. The Hardaway members were annoying, but the Darker Order members were pure evil. You couldn't reason with them. You couldn't riz them up. You couldn't recruit them to join your side. They were beyond help, and the party recognized that. They forced the party to pick up their game. They forced them to work more strategically. Fun and games were over as far as the Darker Order was concerned, and the party started taking things really seriously. Had we started the campaign with that darkness in the world already, I don't think it would have worked as well. So we started fun. And we had these big personalities who were over the top, and, they deserved their comeuppance, but they weren't evil. They didn't have to be eradicated. We finished the campaign with that high drama. And that build is what made the story work. Now, with all that in mind, it was always the party that dictated who the foes were going to be. There were times that I teed up a bunch of other rival parties, like the Blunderbuss Club, but it was always the Hard Way and the Darker Order that drew the attention of the party. So they were the factions that we focused on.
What was the biggest challenge of running this campaign, whether it was a narrative hurdle, a mechanical issue, or just wrangling the chaos of the players?
Biggest challenge was the number of episodes. 44. That number is going to be burned into the back of my skull for a while. 44 episodes is not an easy task. I don't care if it's a home game. I don't care if it's online. In the beginning, I thought it would only be 8 to 10 episodes, one per territory, one at the capital. I grossly underestimated just how long it takes to do a combat in D&D. I underestimated how long it would take to play out a story and for it to be told naturally and not forced. So we played for 2 to 3 hours every week for over a year. If we had had longer sessions, we probably could have condensed the number of sessions in gotten it down under 30. And maybe that would have worked. But it feels like we move things along at the right pace without railroading the the party, and the energy level was able to stay up so that after 2 or 3 hours of role playing, you don't have this fatigue. You don't have players that are nodding off or distracted by checking their phone or whatever. So add on top of that, on top of the 44 episodes that we made, you've got prep time for each one of those episodes, including a bunch of content that the party never even touched. Those are contingencies, right, that are built into the story just in case they decide to turn left instead of right. You've also got time there for the story writing, the map making, the video editing, off camera interviews with the players. We do some aftercare with the episodes, just checking in, saying, hey, how did that episode work for you? Do you have any ideas for the next one? And trying to incorporate all that into the show. So, grand total, we're talking over 300 hours of work that went into this project. A lot of work on behalf of the players as well. But for me, I mean, it was a lot. It's a commitment that I asked for. So I understand. I understood what it would take to do it right. But this is the big reason why most campaigns don't go the distance. I mean, partially you don't, the players stop showing up, but also the DMs burn out. And maybe it would be easier if I was getting paid to do it, but I would do this for free because I like it. It's fun. I committed to the project and saw it through. I built a world that I think is pretty cool and a lot of fun. And when it was over, I just didn't want to have any regrets about anything.
Were there any fights or encounters that were way harder or way easier than you anticipated? If you could go.
Well, the hardest battle, hands down, was the Inferno fight at the docks of Lucha Lucha Town. Back then, I was still pretty green on the mechanics of D&D, especially large combats with a lot of characters. There was still a lot for me to learn about balancing combats, including the challenge ratings and taking into consideration the action economy and the terrain. The thought process was that the party, who were vastly outnumbered in that situation, would just hop on a ship and sail away. But they made a stand and they said, you know what? No, we're not going to allow this. We're going to fight everybody. I didn't think that would happen, and maybe they should have been TPK'd right there and then. I had no choice but to let them fight. And fortunately, there was a point in which they charmed one of the Hardaway members by the name of Nix. They tell him, hey, climb on the ship and fire some cannons at your people while we sail away. I was happy to end the battle right there. I said, yes, 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 please, let's do that. It was a really cool milestone for the party at the time because they had taken a captive at that time and then had this moral dilemma about what to do. The mistake I made with that episode is that I thought I could squeeze too much in to one session. Right? I introduced a new player. That's when Rosa first came in. And then everybody was curious about, well, hey, let's go to the brothel where Rosa was from and let's do a little bit of character development. And then let's go to the docks where there's a fire. And then let's get out of town. So what was supposed to take 2 hours took 4 hours. And people weren't too happy about that. But the end result was pretty good. And from then on, we broke up the sessions into these digestible chunks that just worked much better for everybody involved.
If you could go back and change one thing about how the campaign played out, what would it be?
Well, I want Zinthral back, right? Maybe everybody feels that way, maybe not. The character, that character, was so different than the rest of the party. And when they left, it was a bit of a gut punch for me. I took it as an indictment on my ability that I should have done more. I was the DM dad at the point. You don't want to lose your children. I was hopeful that we could write him back into the story when he was ready, but he just kind of disappeared and never reappeared. So we had plans about Zinthral really tapping into some new features, some new abilities at the time where he embraces his ki and accesses some crazy astral punches with these extra arms. So when he dipped out, I had to pivot pretty hard to keep the show moving along and to not dwell on loss. I would have really liked to have seen his character grow a lot more and mature into a hero. That growth would have been really cool to see. So that's why it was important for me to bring him back for a cameo in the finale. Because me, as the DM, I needed that closure. I needed to know that my kids were okay, right? So we bring him in to deliver justice to Harmon Stonefist as Harmon finally stabs the party in the back. We needed to know that Zinthral was okay, and if Bird, the player behind Zinthral, hears this, I hope you're doing okay, man. We miss you, and we had a lot of fun playing with you.
Let's talk about the party's pet lion, Snugglecup Faceripper. What was his intended role in the campaign, and how did that evolve over time?
Well, Snug was originally introduced as a moral dilemma for the party. They were forced to slay its parents in order to accomplish a mission at the beginning. They were trying to save a farm or a farmer at the time. Merc Brewski, the farmer. In that moment, they could have killed the baby lion as well. They could have set it free. They could have sold it for profit, but they didn't. They kept him. They took him in as like this mascot, and they loved him, right? So the deal I made with them is that as long as Snugglecup does not fight, as long as you don't teach him how to attack, I will never attack Snugglecup. Snug has plot armor as long as you don't turn him into a weapon. But eventually, they couldn't resist, and his animal trainer, Solomon Scribbles, versatile bard of the party, had taught Snug how to do a variety of different actions. I know bards don't usually do a lot of animal handling and certainly don't train them to be a familiar, but with Zinth gone, it made a lot of sense to have a fifth member of the party. And I think it also gave Solomon more versatility than he originally had as just playing a bard. Solomon really was at a loss when there wasn't a lot of social interaction to be had. So when we're combat heavy, he could rely on Snugglecup to have a little bit more action economy. And the moments where you see this gnomish bard riding the back of this lion were cool. I thought that was really cool. Hopefully that was fun as well. So Snug is this plot device to speed things up. He's this agent of chaos within the story. There were times where he strayed from the task at hand, and the party would have to bring him back. But overall, Snug was just cool. I enjoyed him so much, and in fact, I took Snug on as my avatar in the campaign videos. So love you, Snug.
Do you think Snugglecup stays domesticated with the party, or does he return to the wild?
Oh, who knows? Snug belongs to the party at this point. They decide his future, and I've stopped trying to guess what the party ever intends to do because they're going to do what they want to do.
If there were to be a season 2, What themes or conflicts would you want to explore?
Well, people are going to say they want to know what happens with Rosa. They want to see if Bronson can be a good leader to his people and if he's a good daddy. They want to know if Gator is king, and they want to know, does Solomon change his identity one more time, and does he find a new mustache? I don't want any of that. Not that I'm not curious or anything. I just have a bigger idea in my head about what's next. Rather than picking up where we left off, I really like the idea of telling a different story in the same world with new characters. That can mean telling the story of those who paved the King's Road before them, the founders, King Jerry and whatnot. It can mean playing one of the rival gangs, Hardway, Blunderbuss Gang. Maybe they were busy in other parts of the kingdom, or maybe they could play descendants of the realm, the great great grandchildren of the young lions. And who knows what kind of stories and legends of the young lions are in the history books and engraved at the feet of weathered statues at that point. There's a lot more potential left in this game world, and I'm afraid that continuing on the story with the same party would somehow dry out, become stale at a certain point, and ruin the perfect experience that we have so far.
The players have changed the world of Kafabia forever. How different would the setting be if we returned to it in a future campaign?
Well, I hope this new world, is a little bit more accepting of magic, right? Because in Kafabia, no magic. Magic bad, only martial combat. And we learned that those rules were put in place because magic was seen as a threat to the power of the founders. King Jerry was afraid of magic users, which is why he outlawed it. And why he created the King's Road, to keep people occupied with this constant sport and competition. Now that there's a new regime on the throne, those restrictions have gone away. Who knows if the King's Road even continues from here on? You'd expect to see a society flourish in an explosion of life and culture, and with that, some new races, classes, monsters, etc., etc. But that does mean, however, that the pro wrestling kind of takes a back seat. Now we need a new hook. So, on some random Tuesday, a few months from now, inspiration will sneak into my brain. I'll have this shower thought or be stuck in traffic, and inspiration will strike me, and a new concept will come to life, and probably won't be anywhere near as good as what we've done so far. But I'm a world builder, and world builders just can't help themselves. They create, and they put their stuff out there, and they just want to make something that people like. That is my curse. That is my gift. That is my burden. That's it.
Final question. What's your message to the players now that this epic journey has come to an end?
Well, that's a tough question, because I've gotten used to being with these people every week for such a long time. No matter how bad my week was, there's always Thursday night where I can get together online with some people that I don't know and just kind of have a good time and forget about whatever real problems that I have. And we get to play make believe with each other. That was therapy for me. So giving them a goodbye or some type of introspective confession about what this has all meant to me would probably seem disingenuous in a way. It sounds like I'm just blowing smoke up people's butts, and to do all that would seemed too final for me. I'm hoping that we get to game again. But, this is a big but. If I was forced to say something, here's what I would say.
On a journey we go, down the King's Road, with bravery and might, young lions in the night. Cross and strength will guide, gain a story side by side by side. Rose's heart so old, Solomon's wisdom gold. King's Road, young lions, together we're defiant. Adventure never slowing, our legend ever growing. In the ring we fight, with Snugglecup by our side. Champion heart and soul, we conquer every goal. Heroes on the rise, holds the prize in our eyes. Facing fear so daunting, victory is calling. King's Road, young lions, together we're defiant. Adventure never slowing, our legend ever growing.
There comes a time when every story has to end. The last chapter's written, the last match is fought, and the final bell rings. My friends, tonight, that bell has rung for the Young Lions. The campaign was never just about telling a story that I wanted to tell. It was never about rolling dice or trying to make the characters sound cool. This was about a table full of friends telling a story together. A story that we'll talk about for a very long time. And now, I know that our journey has finally reached its conclusion. And for one final time, I just want to say good night and goodbye, young lion.